Spectrum.
Alert!
Spectrum.
Alert, class! Do you believe in a flying spaghetti monster too, Bubblehead?
Hello and welcome back to episode 10 of The Spectrum. Today we're joined here by me, Darren.
I'm Roshan.
I'm A2.
I'm Issa.
I'm Ali.
I'm Mustafa.
I'm Ms Pickering.
So today we're here, of course, joined by Ms Pickering. Ms Pickering here is an English teacher at our school, and we were excited to get on specifically because of her talk on her TEDx talk on embracing vulnerability. So do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'd just like to firstly say how pleased I am to be on the podcast. It's a huge honour. I understand from Mr Haspel that this is the real deal, this is a big honour. So thank you very much for having me on your podcast. My name is Ms Pickering. I'm an English teacher here at QE, and throughout kind of my course of being a teacher here, I've really kind of wanted to talk about mental health, and particularly thinking about mental health in young people. And about this time last year, I delivered a talk as part of our TEDx event, which touched upon various elements of mental health, particularly with regards to my own experiences. And I sort of used the TEDx talk as an excuse to talk about myself, really. It all kind of started for me, or my kind of mental health journey, I suppose, started when I was a student in year 13. And I experienced a really horrific panic attack in my A-level exam. But at the time of that happening, I didn't really realise it was a panic attack because I'd never had one before. So it was a really kind of strange and surreal experience, and I think it was quite strange and surreal for my teachers as well. And everyone thought that was, I wasn't very well because I had all these physical symptoms, which I now know to be a kind of a flight or fight response. And without kind of wanting to go into exactly how old I am, back then conversations around mental health just weren't part of the school curriculum. So I didn't really have any clue about what a panic attack was, but I did have a really amazing, she was actually terrifying, but I had a really, really amazing assistant head teacher who, I'm not going to disclose her name, but I refer to her as Mrs S in my talk, and I will continue to respect her anonymity. And she was the one that said to me that, this is very, very likely to be a panic attack. And my school were really sympathetic and understanding around that. I was kind of, I sat the exam much later that day. I think the reason I was able to do that is because I hadn't been in contact with anyone, and it was kind of, the exam materials were secure and things like that. And it was a really horrible experience, and it's something that even today when I talk about it, I find it difficult to talk about it, and I find it a really, although it shouldn't be shameful, I think that with these incidents we attach shame to any time where we feel vulnerable, and that's sort of what I talked about in my talk, thinking about how my response to that incident actually would have been much better if I'd been able to confront some of those difficulties rather than sort of burying them. And I spoke a little bit about Brené Brown, who I think has got a new book out, or maybe she might be on a new TV show, I don't know why, but I'm seeing her name a lot at the moment. And she's an amazing American researcher. She's a therapist. She writes about all this incredible stuff about resilience and about examining people who are able to be resilient around their own mental health. And one of her big ideas is the fact that we have to confront these things head on, even though that's really difficult. And that's something that is an ongoing process, and even delivering that talk and even talking to you guys today is kind of part of me confronting that. And it's not the case that I feel completely comfortable and I've sorted everything out and it's something that you kind of tick off your list. But that's essentially what my TED Talk was about.
Well, that was very interesting. Thank you very much. I think because we've become so much more accepting nowadays, as part of our school curriculum, I was just wondering, do you think that that's likely to happen nowadays? Given that all of us here, we're going to be seeing exams within a week. So I was just thinking, do you think that students nowadays are more prone to these ideas and accepting them, like panic attacks and stuff like that?
Well, I mean, I'm really conscious that it's a bit of a horror story, what happened to me, and probably in some respects it's not the thing that you guys want to hear with your GCSEs starting next week. But I suppose the reason I tell that horror story is that, you know, even though that bad thing happened, I lived to tell the tale, and actually not only that, but it really, really helped me build those tools of resilience and really kind of build my sort of understanding of how we respond to anxious thoughts. I think there are two sides to this. I think on the one hand, we constantly hear, because we speak about mental health more, and it's a much bigger part of the agenda. We think everyone today is anxious, everyone today is depressed, everyone today is suffering from some kind of trauma. And so on the one hand, you will hear people say, students today are far more prone to these issues. And I think there's a degree of truth in that. I mean, you guys are a far more examined generation than your parents' generation and your grandparents' generation. And we see that even from, you know, I think about the year 7s and year 8s. So I think that there is that. But I think on the other side, perhaps it's not the case that these things are happening more, but more that we are talking about them more.
That we're recognising.
That we're recognising them more, that they become part of our discourse. So I think it's sort of perhaps a mixture of both. And we do live in an incredibly anxious age. If you think about kind of doom scrolling and our treatment of social media, I think that it would be remiss to say that doesn't have any part in how we approach our own lives as individuals.
So, in your case, it was kind of anxiety surrounding the test.
Yeah.
Was that to do with like academic pressure?
I think so. I think that was a really big part of it, and I think academic pressure is definitely where it surfaced for me at that point. But if I really think back, I think I always was quite an anxious person. And I think that it was around the pressure of that particular exam, and there was a lot riding on that exam because I'd got my offer for Oxford in December, and then your offer is conditional on the grades that you get. Now, I wouldn't have received that offer if the university didn't think that I would get those grades. But for me, that was a slow build up of lots and lots of anxiety. So I think academic pressure was a really, really big thing. And it's something that actually I got better at university, because I did go to university where there was lots of academic pressure. And I think actually I had to build tools, I had to build resilience around that.
But do you feel as you get older and kind of say once you finish university, I hope there's less tests, there's no more academic pressure, and then do you feel like as a result of that you have less anxiety kind of?
So that's a really interesting question, and I think that in some respects, yes. In some respects, you are not examined in the same way. You're not having to kind of confront those potentially very, very sort of high points of anxiety. But I don't think I'm not going to lie to you, I'm not going to say that you grow up and you go into the world of work and you never face anxiety.
Yeah.
You never ever face having a panic attack or having a really, really bad day where everything is just making you anxious or having a sleepless night. But I think that what does happen is if you treat your mental health like your physical health, you become better at dealing with it. But some people, you know, they go through their whole lives and they never experience any poor mental health. And maybe it might happen when they're 40, when they're 50. And I think it's different people. For me, I think academic pressure was something that was a particularly difficult thing to deal with because it meant so much to me. And because I really did love studying, and that's partly why I became a teacher. It really did mean a lot to me. And I think because of that, I attached so much importance to it. And it's, you know, it's one part of your life, it's a very important part, but it's not the sum of you as a human being.
I definitely think that would be experienced by a lot of people in our school, particularly.
I think, because Curie, with like the culture that we like have here at Curie with the ES test and testing since year 7, I think to an extent that fosters this like mentality where you have to perform well. And definitely myself, I've experienced that. I feel like a lot of my self-worth is dependent on how I perform in the class.
our school kind of builds that sentiment, and you've got a feel for the year 13s who have never had to sit a public exam. The anxiety that is building up on them, given that they've had to go through COVID and everything while studying, I think because they've got their first public exam ever coming up in like a week, I've been SATs, if you consider that. I think you've got a feel for them because they've got a lot of pressure on them, especially if they've got conditional offers that they need to satisfy.
Definitely.
To me, it makes sense why so many people are like so anxious when it comes to academics, because if you were to look at a year 10 who's say maybe got their second essential skills exam, like if they were to flunk that, then the chances are, like if they were to really mess it up, chances are they might not be able to study at QE, and that's like a really big pressure to deal with at 14 when you've spent kind of your whole year 5 working to get into QE, and then 4 years down the line, like it's gone.
And I guess I'm interested in your perspective here, AT, because I do believe you're not staying here next year.
Oh no.
Oh, you're staying?
That's
What are you taking?
It's just a little surprise.
First announcement.
Yeah. Oh, what I'm taking? I'm taking French, hopefully French, or politics, history, sociology and philosophy.
Oh, okay.
So,
Nice.
I mean,
that's the STEM subjects.
Yeah, I'm very
Similar to you.
I mean, I dictate maths, but French, German, and history. I will be seeing you in French along with Mustafa.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, good sessions.
One thing I was wondering, does everyone think that mental health and like reaching a certain level of success, do you think they can coexist, or do you think there's like an inevitable cost that everyone will pay? Because like I don't know, has anyone heard of David Goggins? Anyone?
Yeah.
You've heard of him. So one of his like big philosophies is that like to reach anywhere successful, you have to like really grind yourself down and go through like X amount of suffering. But then you have like the opposite side. There'll be other people like Tim Ferriss, for example, who believes the complete opposite, that like suffering is like almost some sort of like we should be allergic to it, like completely stay back from
It's
it.
detrimental.
Yeah, because like any amount of suffering that we don't have to go through would sort of like, it would have like a lingering effect which like brings down how successful you can be. So like, what does everyone think about that? Do you think it's like an inevitable cost you have to pay ultimately?
I think it depends on what you see like success as. I feel like everyone in this school sees success through like doing well in academics, getting a good job, and with that path you're inevitably going to have to get like you're going to have to persevere. It's going to be really tough, but you could see success as just like living a happy life, and then the whole point of kind of your idea of success is to not have to go through anything like that.
I think in terms of stressful situations, it depends on how you learn from that, how you take that. If you're hung up on it for the rest of your life, like it's kind of detrimental. But if you learn from that for next time, say like in your case, if you had a panic attack, perhaps did you use that later on in life? Like, did you use that resilience that you built up?
Definitely, 100%. 100%.
Yeah, so I think it depends on how you take it as a measure of success, at least.
I guess from your perspective, during Mental Health Week as a teacher, how has your experiences as a student like affected the way that you teach and like interact with your students?
I think that's a really good question, and I hope, and I personally feel like it's completely shaped my role as a teacher. And part of the reason that I really enjoy teaching, I don't teach any of you actually, but part of the reason that I really enjoy teaching here is that I do feel like I really relate to a lot of the students here, and I do relate to the pressure and the kind of the self-criticism that comes with wanting to do well academically. I suppose my role as a teacher, and I've always thought this, is my job is not just to teach English. My job is not just to sort of teach people to pass an exam. I think it's really important that although that is ultimately when you come out of school you want a set of grades that means that you can go off and do whatever it is that you want to do. But I think it's more about looking at the whole person and making sure that no one thinks that, you know, getting a bad test score is in some way a reflection on them as a human being, even though inevitably we attach such significance to these things. So I think it does definitely shape the way that I am as a teacher. And I think also I do sometimes as a teacher, I mean, you guys are under pressure teachers are under pressure as well. You know, the whole system is, and I know that that's not going to be something that's always immediately obvious to you guys, because, you know, teachers should shield you from that. But I think that it's also about making sure that you as a teacher are not putting the pressure that you feel onto those students, for example, and being very, very aware of that, and being aware of those pressure points and how you can make sure that that is not something that a student feels too acutely.
Having come under so much pressure for that A-level exam, do you think that we should switch to a different system, such as America, where it's like cumulative throughout the whole year?
So is that how the SATs are different, right?
So the SAT is slightly different. It's just one standardized exam, but they have like a GPA, which they build up over years, and that kind of helps in determining what university they go to.
Right.
Yeah.
And the way that the offers work in the States, they're not contingent on the SATs. Are they contingent on your GPA?
I think that
It's a mixture of both. I think a mixture is I mean, it's interesting that you asked that, because actually lots of universities, you have kind of scores which are, you know, you've got, it's modular, so you have kind of your first year results, your second year results, your third year results. Now, I went to a university where that didn't actually happen, and for my course, my whole degree was determined on 4 exams that I sat in my very last week of university, and that's the way that the humanities degrees are awarded at Oxford. Now, on the one hand, that was really good, because I felt that, as I read history at Oxford, and I felt that I was a much better historian in my final year than I was in my first year. My essays in first year weren't very good. So actually, it gave me that time to develop. But on the other hand, it was a kind of a replica of the current, you know, A-level system, where those final exams are so important. So I don't think there's a perfect response here. I'm not anti-exams. I know that lots of people are very anti the idea of exams. I think exams are actually a really good thing. I think they teach you how to cope under stress. I think it's a much fairer way of testing ability and testing attainment across different groups in society. I suppose my question would be, do we need to be testing as frequently as we are? But maybe that helps. Maybe having frequent testing means that when you get to the GCSEs, that means that you are not, it's not kind of a completely different thing that you haven't had to cope with before.
I would argue that regular testing helps us, especially here, because everyone here seems like they use those regular tests as a way to grow themselves.
Yeah.
That's how you're meant to take it.
Yeah.
I don't know if everyone takes it that way.
I feel like the school put pressure on regular tests, and that's been sustained for so long, especially since year 10, and I just think that's really harmful, because you've had 2 years of like really intense examinations, and I wanted to ask, in your like personal opinion, what do you think that the school could do to help with people's mental health?
I think encouraging there to be far more open conversations, which I think is something which is definitely very high on the school's sort of PGT curriculum. I think that I think it's really great that you guys are all sat down talking about this, because I think that young men, without wanting to kind of place a label on anyone, I think young men do find it very difficult to talk about these things, and I think that maybe there needs to be an emphasis on the way in which we can get people to open up. That can be very difficult, that can be really, really challenging. You can't force someone to talk about their mental health. And if you do try and force someone, that can be very, very dangerous. So I think continuing to encourage open conversations, and I think also kind of normalising the fact that speaking to a professional, speaking to someone who is not your parent, not your teacher, not your friend, you know, referring people to those facilities. But those facilities are here. They are open to everyone. It's just whether or not people feel like that's something that they want to do.
And I guess from that, because the way I talk about my mental health in a PDT session compared to my sister, compared to my counsellor who I used to go to, not anymore. It's all very different, and I do find that I am the most honest with my sister, which is, I guess, it's talking to a random person that you don't know and will never interact with outside of your own experiences. And to an extent that can be good, but also I don't know if you guys can relate to this, but I struggle to open up to someone that I barely know.
Yeah,
It's all about safety nets, isn't it?
Accountability
Knowing
as
who
well,
you can talk to.
I find it a lot easier to talk to my mum compared to anyone else. In terms of you mentioned Israel, I forgot. But I just wanted to talk about how in our recent assembly, our head of year talks about how the school had another counsellor, and that was quite shocking to me because I think it was only maybe mid last year our school had one counsellor and they've had to double that number. I just find that really upsetting.
Is it upsetting, or is that actually a good thing? Does that mean that people are using the counsellor, and does that mean that the school are thinking people are really using this counsellor in a way that they didn't before, so we need to make sure that we've got another counsellor so that more of our boys can go and speak to someone?
But I would argue that counselling isn't kind of the most effective way to help people. I would think that kind of tackling the problem from the cause and changing people's perspective on how they value themselves is a lot better to speaking to someone once the problem's develops.
That's true. I do think it takes much longer to change a culture though.
Yeah, interesting.
So I think in terms of the now, I don't think the number of boys developing mental health issues has changed as much as like the usage, as you said, the usage of a counselling service. So I do think it's good that like where possible we're getting more services. And it is a shame to see that not all schools, like if you look across the whole country, I'm sure there's big discrepancies in like the quality of service provided, which like it's not, do you know what I mean? That's not the best thing to have to, if you're trying to seek for a service but it's just not there for you, that's something that's also quite upsetting.
I also think that the landscape in terms of kind of children's mental health will change a lot in a generation's time when we're parents, and we have a like fairly different, we give our kids a fairly different upbringing to what our parents give us, and I guess like we take our life lessons and kind of instill that into our kids. Because if you, for example, a lot of people in school have parents from immigrant backgrounds, and as a result of that, those parents usually don't have the most high achieving jobs per se, and I think that feeds into the kids because the parents want their kids to get these really kind of esteemed jobs, and that I feel like that's the root problem, especially in this school. But say in generations time when we have our kids, that won't be on our mind as much, I would say, and that would completely change it.
I think you'd certainly hope that happens, but if it's always going to be a mindset that you get from your parents, then that means that we as a generation we need to change ourselves. It's like how likely is that for that to change that much from our generation being not forced but very much advised to go for these kind of STEM subjects, which like is something we have to accept. Our parents do generally.
I would say the STEM, engineering, medic, or law.
Yeah, like the top
all
three
of us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm thinking finance.
But I say even in the 11 plus, I remember me and my dad say that our mum emotionally blackmails us, kind of as if like we're expected to do the 11 plus, and like me and my younger brother couldn't imagine not doing it because our mum asked us to, and it's like from there you get into QE, and then you see everyone else's ambitions, and it's like you're inclined to want to like do as good as them, I guess. But yeah,
I do think that the school puts a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of similar people that want to go into similar, industries because of the upbringing that we have, and of course the 11 plus.
I do think it's something to embrace though, like being able to sort of like repay, because it's not easy to be an immigrant family, especially in this country. So like, I know my parents they moved to a load of different countries, so I do feel like it sort of incentivizes trying to work as hard as you can and sort of like repay them with your success.
I mean, one thing we're good at here is that we do end up as hard workers on the whole, because obviously we have to, with this kind of culture around getting good grades to get into a good job, like that builds hard work because you have to work to get that stuff.
I mean, with that being said, yesterday I had an econ teacher. He said that QE makes boring but safe students or people.
I don't think that's true. I don't know who said that to you.
We might have to get them one for the next episode. Maybe.
Next episode.
No, I agree.
Boring. QE.
Yeah,
I agree with
100%.
that.
Absolutely not.
If
Absolutely
not.
If you're the only one taking a non-STEM, am I correct in saying non-STEM?
Yeah,
I'm
do.
doing maths.
Yeah,
I'm just doing
so-
maths and STEM.
Yeah.
Is it?
STEM
Okay.
boring. I'm sorry.
Yeah, STEM is.
I don't think no. Me and
Amazing
Russian aren't
maths.
doing STEM. Right?
Yeah, it's just maths. Yeah.
No, I think QE is extremely boring. I complain about this. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say it in front of you, but over the past years, I don't think there's ever been a fight in our school. It's like, I'm just saying, in every other school they have like.
Do you think
they have
that
fights
the typical
pretty
high
often.
school experiences are missed at QE?
100%. I mean, Miss, have you taught any other schools before?
I have. I taught at a very different school to QE.
And
I
there are a
taught
lot of
at a. Yes, there were lots of
Fights.
fights.
Which means it's more fun for
Yes,
the
there were
students.
lots of fights. I don't know. I mean, is it, you guys are in a safe environment. I know that you're now going to accuse me of being boring for saying that, but my last school is very different to QE. So it's very interesting as a teacher to work in different schools and to see different environments. I never hear anyone talking about the experience, going back to what both of you have said actually, of kind of being from an immigrant family, or kind of the pressure that kind of puts on you.
Yeah.
I never ever hear students talk about that.
Have you assumed that though, like based on kind of the demographic of the school?
Well, I think that there's definitely, students do say to me that STEM is kind of a big thing that kind of comes from perhaps some of the kind of the cultural backgrounds of their families. But I never hear anyone talking about the fact that there's this there's a certain ethic of working hard and kind of the generational aspect, and that's really interesting.
I think it does differ because obviously you have people who are like first generation immigrants and second generation immigrants, depending on where your parents were born. I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, it can be, if you put a nice spin on it, it can be a very good thing. But I feel like some of the pressure does come from pressure you put on yourself, sort of, because you do feel like you are due like a certain amount of success, or like the efforts of your parents aren't worth it, but it is a good motivator in my opinion. But I mean, I didn't know you wouldn't have like heard about it.
I don't think that students kind of candidly say that.
Yeah,
maybe they don't
enough.
candidly say it to teachers. Maybe
Yeah.
there are all kinds of reasons why they wouldn't say that in that way. But it's really it's very interesting to hear you say that.
I think it's more implicit because comparison is so rife in this school. Like you kind of get the impression that everyone's working, if not for themselves, then at least to please their parents, or I mean, at this stage it would be hopefully for yourself. I would hope that it's for yourself.
I still hear year sevens and the coach like, oh, my dad really wants me to become a doctor, so I'm really working hard in science. It's not even biology yet, it's just science. And having that pressure from like, what are they, 11, 10?
Well, it didn't mean before they were 11.
Exactly. Like it's from, I don't know, years 5, I feel like I've been told lawyer, doctor, engineer. That was obviously a joke to an extent, but I feel like that's brought me down my course. I initially wanted to become an engineer, then I realised I don't like STEM. And then I'm looking at law now, so I think it is very influenced by parents and family as a whole. You look at that with A-level options especially.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Are you a second generation or first?
I'm second generation.
Oh, okay. I just feel like a lot of people in the school who are second generation tend to do STEM. I'm a third generation. I feel like that extra generation. Third is my grandparents. Yeah. And I just feel like my parents are a bit more lenient compared to everyone else's parents in terms of academics, because I'm a third generation immigrant.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'm also a third immigration immigrant, and my mum, she just says she wants me to be happy.
Oh. Yeah, that's what my mum says.
Just to achieve, so just be happy and try to achieve what's good for you.
But it's not like there's no link between money and happiness. So
That's
going into
true.
those high-paying jobs, I think that's what perhaps our parents see as the safe option.
Yeah,
as
just
happiness,
like this school is a safe option to happiness. I mean,
it's an interesting question. I don't know how much time we have left. Thank you, first of all, for joining us for this.
Thank you.
I know, with the exception of Frankenstein in year 9, you haven't taught any of us before, and you still decided to come onto our podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Were you my online
Yeah,
class?
that was brutal, I must say.
Yeah.
Frankenstein is very boring. If
I
you
don't
have a
think I
class.
read any of it, to be honest. Sorry,
You tell me
miss.
that now. It's fine.
I read all of it, I have to be honest. On the Wikipedia pages,
Yeah, it was on Wikipedia,
so hard to read because, especially when you're at home, we're getting off topic. But thank you for joining us and
Thank
being
you so much.
speaking about
Thank
your
you.
opportunities.
Yeah.
And I think our next episode will be next
Oh
year.
my god.
Next year, soft reboot.
Is that the wrap of
Yeah,
season 1?
And end of season
That
one.
is a wrap of season
So
1.
thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.